Hello, and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast, your serving of drinks culture and the people who drive it. I'm Jeff Porter, writer at large and reviewer for Northern Italy here at Wine Enthusiast. Italy and its wines hold a special place in many people's hearts and on the table, but it remains a mystery to most of us because of its diversity of grapes, thousands of years of history, and numerous styles of wine. Today we are speaking with two people working hard to break down those barriers and get to the root of what makes Italian wine so special. Master of Wine Andrea Lonardi and journalist Jessica Dupuy together are exploring the ins and outs of Italian wine via Andrea's philosophy of Italianality. What does that mean and how can we use it? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. Good morning to Jessica and good afternoon to Andrea. This is the beauty of the global internet that we have. Now I sound like an 800-year-old person, the global internet. But I'm super excited to talk to y'all today. I have two of the most esteemed journalists, writers, wine professionals that there are across the globe on our podcast today. We have Andrea Lonardi and Jessica Dupuy, a combination that I think on paper we wouldn't be sure that happened, but the beauty of the wine business is chance meetings develop relationships that last a lifetime. And that's what we're going to dig into today. Jessica hails from Texas, my home state as well, and is a renowned journalist who has also contributed to Wine Enthusiast amongst many other publications, and is Andrea's partner in this project they're going to speak about later today. And then Andrea Lonardi is one of Italy's foremost wine scholars, winemakers, vignerons. When you pull up your MW profile, you have expertises on so many different things that we're going to dig into. You have to actually scroll. Like if you look at my bio on one thing, you just look at it. But you have to kind of go down. There's so many things that you've touched in your career. And I was thinking back, Andrea, like when we first met, must have been at Del Posto, maybe over a decade and a half ago. And just the energy that you brought helped kind of transform my wine career. And I think a lot of other people around the globe can say the same. But today we're going to talk about what brought y'all two together and why Italy now specifically holds this place in the world of wine that I think is greater than it's ever been in its existence. So welcome to you both, and thank you very, very much for joining us. Jessica,
yeah,
I'm really, really curious about how a Texan like yourself got into wine and ended up being the partner with Andrea on this project that we're going to speak about soon.
Well, not to embellish a stereotype for Texans, but as they say, everything's bigger in Texas. And in my case, my mouth is really big. So I have a tendency to throw out a bunch of ideas at times and end up getting myself tangled into things. So in the case of Andrea, I was on a trip while he was working with Valdasuga in Montalcino a few years ago, and that's the first time I met him. And like you, Jeff, I was very kind of enamored with the energy that he brought to the room. He was not just an ordinary winemaker talking about all the tools and bells and whistles he had in his cellar. He was talking about something much deeper than even the wines on the table. And so it was kind of my first intuition, like this guy's got something going on that I think he wants to express, and I can't figure out quite what it is. So then about a year later, I came back, and this time was at Bertani in Valpolicella, and he was speaking again. And this is when he started using this word, Italianality or Italianity. And I think that it was this connection point for me where I was like, this is kind of where he was going the first time I met him. His energy is still really high. He's very inspired when he starts talking about this. And there's this passion there. And yeah, I think, you could argue that a lot of Italians have this kind of passion and this great energy when they come talk about just about anything that excites them. But with Andrea, this was deeper. And so, I don't know, we were talking and I was like, you're really into this. I think you should really capture this, and you should write a book about this. This would be an amazing book because it really spans the country. It would really give people kind of like an under the hood look at the personality and beyond just what's in the glass, the people behind it, He's like, that's a great idea. I totally want to do that, but I don't write, so I'm going to need you to write it for me. And I was like, oh, okay. And that, I mean, but once I grab an idea like that, I'm like, all right, let's run with it. Let's see how far we can take this. And so that's been the process for the past few months, is developing, really charting it out. How do we do this? And, using connections that I have in the US and obviously connections he has in Italy. And it's been a really, really exciting time.
Well, I think it's like you, again, the infectiousness of Andrea is kind of this charm that just, not charm as like charming personality, but a charm that like you want to be next to all the time to learn and grow from. And Andrea, sorry to make you blush a little bit. I can see it through this screen, because you're one of the most humble people I've ever met in the wine industry, for someone that has a resume that you look at it, you don't think one person could do all that. And I want to start we'll start at today and work a little bit backwards to get the background on why Italianity exists, and bring me back to it, everybody, because I'm going to say it a few times wrong, because I'm still learning Italian, but now we're cramming Italian and part of an English word together. So Andrea, can you tell us first the title of the philosophy that you've been working on the past few years?
First of all, thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jessica. I'm really proud to be here today talking about this project. Jessica was really, both of you were very important in this project. First, Jeff, because the third time that I pronounced the word Italianity was in front of Jeff. And Jeff brought me the idea about developing this concept. He gave me the dimension of what is Italianity. So Italianity, it was before just an idea. With Jeff, it became an idea with a weight. And for me, when there is weight, it's like a wine. When it has a mid-palate weight, it starts to be such a wine. And thanks to Jessica, because Jessica was the person that when I met, I realized how much is important to do things in a team. And I say, if there is only one opportunity that I can give to somebody else, the opportunity of reading and understanding about Italianity, is if I will do that with a professional person. And I say the right person to do is not just because she's a great journalist, writer, but for me because she's a great person, and I think that this is the right person to share the idea with her. So Italianity is just expressing the fact that I'm not 100% in terms of blood Italian, but I grew up in Italy. I come from a long generation, 4 generation in Valpolicella winemaking family. We're actually vigneron. We own the lands and we were making wines for such a long time. But probably there are some part of my blood, as many people in the north side of Italy, that has some Austrian blood. But I am Italian, and I really realized that I became a stronger Italian when I moved away from Italy for many years, because I worked internationally in many different places, regions, countries. And finally, I realized that my background, my DNA, in some places different, and again I realized that it's beautiful to work in an environment where people are different and everybody can bring a more complexity to the table. But there is for sure in this table the fact that if there are different people, you can easily recognize a guy that is from, a girl that is from Italy. They are talking, they are expressing, they are showing the fact that they are Italian in a very unique way. You might not probably say where exactly this guy is coming from, but you can sure say, okay, this person is for sure Italian because it is such Italian. And I think that there is a perfect connection between people and wine. So it's the same in terms of wine. When you taste a lot of wines, you can say, probably I don't know exactly where this wine is coming from, but for sure it's a Bordeaux blend, and probably this wine is from Bordeaux, or maybe it can be from South Africa. But it is not for sure a Napa Valley or an Australian Cab. But if you taste some Italian wines, you can easily say, I don't know if it is Barolo, if it is Sangiovese from Tuscany, or from Brunello, or maybe is Nerello Mascalese from Etna, but there is one thing that I'm sure 100%. This is such an Italian wine. And so Italianity is expressing this sense, and it is not a sense of simplicity, but it is starting by communicating something that is very simple, analyzing the complexity that is inside.
When you were abroad, and this is, I think, before the idea of Italianity kind of sunk into your brain, but you had mentioned that it was not until you were abroad, and I'm curious where you were and what was the thing that triggered you to realize, wow, I'm Italian. I find that an interesting thing, that it was going away from your home country to realize kind of who you were internally.
There will be a chapter, an essay inside the book that is really expressing this sense. One of the big supporters of my Italianity sense was Rocco Lombardo. When Rocco is the president of Wilson Dennis in the United States, and it was my boss when I started to work as a sales guy in New York back to 25 years ago. We were a sales division. Rocco was the GM of the Metropolitan Sales Division of Manhattan for Freddie Quayman. And always we were discussing with Rocco, and Rocco recently told me something that is unique and say, the Italian has like a sense of minority versus the French.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, there is, and always, and that is the reason because I moved from Italy. The sense of inferiority.
Inferior. I think this is a thing I've explained to a lot of people in my time as a sommelier working in Italian restaurants and speaking with producers. And I feel it's until recently, and this is when you and I spoke last, when we were doing that Bertani event in New York, there was a chip on the shoulder for Italian wine producers with regards to France. There's this thing, you always had to look over your shoulders, like, what are the French doing? What do we have to do to be like them? And I feel like today, and this is where I think your philosophy, Andrea, really struck me, is today I feel like Italians only need to look forward, and so many of them are. They don't have to look back, and there's no inferiority.
There is no inferiority. And then by traveling and by trying to go around, I went to Languedoc, Montpellier, moved to Bordeaux, Rhone Valley, Burgundy, Champagne. I went to Sonoma when Sonoma started to be the most important wine region in the world for the new type of Chardonnay made in the Burgundian style. On the same time, I was traveling in Napa Valley. And there was always a research of trying to be somebody else. And after doing this experience, and after that starting the Master of Wine, I realized that Italy need to remove completely the sense of inferiority that we have versus other wine regions, estates. We have our sense of place. We have our sense of being Italian. Let's express that part. And starting by the big concept and say, I'm Italian. And after that, I will tell you why I'm Italian from Sicily, from Tuscany. And if I'm from Tuscany, why I'm different. If I come from Chianti Classico, why I'm different from a person that is from Vino Nobile or Brunello Montalcino, or if you have a project in the coast in Bulgaria. So, but without any sense of inferiority, but try to bring out the values of the different areas. And when you start the Master of Wine, you start to have descriptors that tell you why this wine is from Bordeaux, why this wine is a Pinot Noir from Nuit Saint-Georges, and why it is a Premier Cru from Nuit Saint-Georges. And I started to think how we can express that in Italy. Which are the different elements that distinguish us? And I started to realize that by trying to find the different elements that were making the difference between the regions and the grape varieties, I started to realize that more than any other place, probably South Africa has this sense of South African style. Other regions, Italy has some aspects that are common, and not other regions has this aspect. Like a Nebbiolo or a Sangiovese or a Nerello Mascalese from the they have a bunch of aspects that are common between them.
It's, even though, I mean, this is like in a more metaphorical sense than scientific sense, obviously, is that there's a DNA that runs north to south, east to west, that links all these things together, I think unknowingly at the beginning. And it's only now through people like yourself, through tasting. And I was thinking that, do you feel that your masters of wine experience, going through that whole process, tasting wines from all over the world, having to be didactic about places that have nothing to do with Italy, do you think that experience helped you draw inferences and understanding on Italy itself?
Yes, for sure. The Master of Wine was brought me in another dimension. But brought me in another dimension not because it gave me the title of Master of Wine, because it was a place and it was a network where I needed to show and I needed to present and I needed to develop net and connection in a different way. So I was exposed in a certain situation when I really realized that it was an opportunity for me to talking about Italy in another level. And that is part of also our team with Gabriele and Pietro. We were the first, not just because we were better than somebody else, just because we decided to work in team. And we brought inside the institute the Italian way of being Master of Wine. So we totally studied, lived, we shared wines, money, finance, hotels, all together. But on the same time, we were always very elegant. We were always on time. We were always on top of the subject. So we brought the new Italian way. So, and that was a sense of bringing to the room and say, hey, Italians are not just pasta and mandolino. Italians today are something different.
Yeah, if I could add, I think it's a fascinating, from an outside perspective, I feel like in knowing Andrea now the way that I do, what's interesting is the Master of Wine almost was like that final key that allowed him to be able to use the word Italianality. So leaving his home and working in other places is one of them, but then the Master of Wine. And Jeff, you may know this because we're both American. I've lived in the UK or been in the UK quite a bit. And I feel like we almost take for granted as sommeliers and wine professionals, the world of wine that is at our fingertips and how we are taught to express it either on the floor or in our writing. But having that Italianness, a lot of times you get those narrow blinders if you're not traveling, if you're not tasting wines from around the world. And the more he was talking about Italian wines in this way, it became clear to me that it's because he's had the experience of comparing wines from other places, even South Africa, not just France, right? Not just the French superiority complex, but everywhere else. So to me, I just wanted to mention that's kind of that final little piece of the puzzle that's given him that ability to kind of emphasize it with more clarity, with more definition.
Yeah. I want to just back up a little bit. For those people who aren't so inside baseball as we are, the Master of Wine program is in my opinion, having studied for the Master Sommelier and taking the test 2 times and not passing it, I never pursued the WSET. I'm thinking about it now that I'm older and feel like I have a different kind of path in my life. But so WSET in the Masters of Wine program is, I think in my head, kind of the most comprehensive education program, and to become a Master of Wine is a monumental feat that I think is greater than climbing Everest or even being an astronaut. But I'm a little biased. But for those that don't know, so there are 3 Masters of Wine from Italy. Andrea was number 2. There was another gentleman who's all our friend Gabriele Gorelli was the first one, and then Pietro Russo from Sicily got his recently. And this is all within the past 18 months.
Yeah,
the 3 of you have all become Masters of Wine.
Yes.
And I like what you said is you brought an Italianness that was known, but then the new Italy, which now living in Italy, I think so many people, specifically in the States, have a misnomer about what does it mean to be an Italian. They're always late. It's a little like manana mentality. And that's not true. Italians are some of the hardest working, on time, punctual, get it done people I've ever met in my life. And this is for the entire country, north to south. It's a little different in every region, But there is a misnomer, and I think for the three of you to work like that together and prove to the world that this is the new Italy is such a milestone, and chapeau to you and your colleagues for this great achievement. I remember that the day I saw the Instagram that you passed, I DM'd you. I was like, oh my God, congratulations. But to be able to, I like what you said, to unlock that unlock that final door for us to speak about that. And that's what I want to get into, the heart of the matter now, that we've all kind of caught up this philosophy. And I'll never forget it. We were at a seminar for Bertani about Amarone, which is a wine that's near and dear to my heart. I'm one of the weird sommeliers in the world today that I'm a supporter, and I believe in Amarone, and I think people need to stop looking at it just as a wine of process. There is terroir and a unique quality to the wine. But it was at this luncheon that we're having that you brought up, Italian, and again, correct me, Jessica, it's Italian and personality put together. So it's Italianality.
Perfecto.
Grazie. So Italianality, and you mentioned it, Andrea, and it hit me like a giant wave in Hawaii. Like, it bowled me over, because for 20 years, I could not put a finger on what I've been trying to explain to people. And you wrapped it up in one word, and I was instantly hooked. You kind of explained it as a whole, but could you give us, and obviously for the people will dig in deeper into the book, but as you, through all these things that put together and finally having the MW kind of unlock that key, in a brief overview, how would you really describe, Italianality to us as the lay people that aren't so deep into Italian wine culture?
Italianity is a matter of three things. If we are talking with a glass of wine in front of us, it's a matter of color, it's a matter of aromas, and a matter of palate structure. Colors. Let's see let's talking about reds. They have always pale ruby color. But there is a second aspect about pale ruby color. It's not just pale, it's a pale ruby that if you age, the wine stay for many years the same. And if you go to aromas, there are other aspects. The aromas is this combination of what I call Campari character. It's orange peel, maritime herbs, a little bit of pepper, some cherry, candy fruit, some balsamic, that is what we call, it's better to explain, like alpine herbs. So this very complex combination of things is what I call Amaro Campari character. And the third element is the palate structure, and it is built by two things. It's what is made by acidity and tannins level. They bring into the palate an incredible energy. So the combination of the two things expressed in one element that I like to call verticality, but it is more about energy. So that is something that Jessica invented, and I really love this part, is there are grapes that are connecting very well this aspect. And Jessica expressed that part in, this is a spine, it's our spine in the back. And starting by Nebbiolo, you stop in the north with a little bit of Schiava and Corvina, and you go down to Tuscany, and it is all about Sangiovese. And you go down a little bit farther, and you arrive in Sicily, it is Nerello and a little bit of Nero. So these grapes varieties, they are all connected in a spine. They have a bone in the middle, and I think that this is also the part where our nervous, they're moving, and I think that Italy has this spine that is connecting these three varieties. For sure, they are different. If you go inside, they have specific element, and in the book we will explain about the different elements about that, but they are all connected in an incredible way.
And Jessica, when you first sat down to discuss this book idea, How did you compute this? And what were the things that, you were like, okay, and it kind of created this energy within yourself to like be like, okay, the spine. Like in my head, once I saw and read earlier about the spine, I immediately thought, okay, well, there's the Apennines, and that's kind of a really good metaphor. And then also, is that kind of that when you were sitting down, these like light bulbs went off, and you're just connecting all the dots.
Yeah, it's a culmination of a lot of things, because I think, north to south, we always talk about Italy as the boots, and now we're moving away from the boot and we're talking about the spinal cord. But I do think that, we want to be, I want to be careful, and Andrea is the same way, because we'll talk about whites in a similar way. But, in terms of the red grapes, there are hundreds of grape varieties throughout the country of Italy. So we don't want to dismiss any of them, but there really is these core elements, especially from a global perspective, right? Like these are the grape varieties that are really getting out there, and that people are starting to understand and lock in and zero in on that. Okay, this is the core of what Italianality is in terms of red wines. And it just so happens that it really does go north to south along that geography. Is it the Apennines? I don't know. Or Apennines. Is it a scientific thing? We're not scientists, so we're not even going to touch that. We will bring in some voices of different people who scientifically may be able to speak to that. These aren't necessarily grape varieties that are familially joined together, but it is definitely a common thread that you definitely experience throughout these Italian wines. But for me, my background is also in food, in addition to wine writing, and it's in social culture. And so the more we were talking about it, it's like, okay, so there's the common thread. This is how the wines function, but it's so much more than that. And when you taste some of these wines in the glass, you're never, except for sommeliers like us who might be like training for a new certification or something, the wines are enjoyed at a table with people, among friends, among family. It's part of the lifestyle. It's part of the way things are made. And so to me, it was like, how do we encapsulate that all together into one story? And so I think that's what you're going to find in this book is not only is it a very, I don't want to say academic, because we're trying to not be too academic, but we're trying to be very much show, not tell, if you will, through the words that we write. But you're going to see things like, I don't want to name specific names yet, but, being in Bulgaria, like this is a perfect example of a region where perhaps French inferiority was a problem for a while. But now, after so many decades of creating Bordeaux blends, Bulgaria has adopted a French way, and now those grapes have adopted Italy, right? But we'll dig deeper into showing someone that's from there that wasn't trying to prove this in any particular way other than just working hard and doing what needed to be done. And at the same time, raising a family and cooking, local ingredients and having, this coastal lifestyle. So you may find a recipe or two from that person. There's going to be more depth to it than just the wines, but it's certainly going to be the wines that guide it.
In Italy right now is going through this kind of, I feel like, generational shift amongst many, many estates across the entire peninsula. With Italianality, are you seeing a shift in philosophy amongst the younger generation coming up because they've had maybe more exposure to travel or more wines? Or is that just more information, just like you had in studying for the MW, but they're still retaining the essence of Italianality as you see it?
Yeah, I think, Vino Nobile is a really interesting region in terms of being on the precipice of having a next generation really want to take the reins to a different direction. And I was recently, earlier this week, actually, with a number of the younger kind of next gen group. They were at a tasting in Houston. And I've met them before at Anteprima, and it's this group of guys. And I was talking to one of them, and they said, we literally have put together a tasting group. We are trying to make sure that we're tasting wines from other parts of the world. We're traveling. They're doing these tastings in different parts of the world. And they're more than that, They are just wide-eyed and like a sponges, just sucking everything in that they can, because their goal is not to emulate or copy what else is out there, but it's giving them perspective on what they have and how they can use all the tools that the rest of the world is using to be able to make their regional identity stronger. And I think we all, if you know anything about Vino Nobile, I'm obviously not saying Di Montepulciano, right? Because there's a little bit of a name game that's troublesome for them from a marketing standpoint. But these guys are all, and I should say girls too, because, it's Francesca and Maria Estrella at Poliziano. They're a brother-sister team that are going into this. I think that that is an example of how we're going to start to see this next generation take things forward, and particularly in a region that needs that,
I want to follow up on a quick thread that you said, Andrea. You said you saw this shift where Italianality really started to form, that people could identify specifically that, because prior to that, I agree. I think the majority of Italy was chasing something else, trying to be, someone else. Was it everyone working up to this point to get the French monkey off their back? Or was there a mentality shift, or is it a global shift? And because you've traveled the world, you've had your hands in everything all over the place for wine, so you've had a much better picture on how the world is adapted to Italy and Italy adapted to the world. So I'm really curious about this point.
There are different elements, because at that time there was a change. I would like to tell you mine first. My personal one was that I moved to Sicily in 2003. And I remember that we used to have money from the European community to plant Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon instead of Nero d'Avola and Herba Muscatese. So if you were planting Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc, you were receiving more money than planting Catarratto. And we were also planting in a very continental way, so with 5,000, 7,000 vines per hectare, and we were destroying part of the culture, of the Sicilian culture, so the Gobelin and the bush wines, these type of things. And just a few years later, I'm not talking about 20 years later, I'm talking about 5, 7 years later, I was telling to a big group, hey guys, what we are doing here is wrong. Here there is a Mediterranean viticulture. And this Mediterranean viticulture, in the next 15 years, that was the beginning of the climate change, and this is the final answer. The climate change that brought that. It brought me the idea of saying, hey, we have the gold in our hands. We have great varieties that are supporting climate change. We have a model of viticulture that it will be expanded in other regions, because other regions, they will be in condition as we are now, as we were in the past. And so I started, and in the company where I was, there was a GM, Emilio Pedron, that was very sensitive about these type of things. And he say always, Andrea, explain me more about that. Explain me more about that. I say, what we try to copy doesn't work here. Doesn't work in our Mediterranean climate. And even or not, if you are in every single place where you are in Italy, if there is not a maritime influence, there is a lake influence. There is something, or there is a mountain influence, but you are in such Mediterranean atmosphere everywhere. And so for that reason, the first element was the climate change. Climate change started to tell me, what you are trying to copy doesn't work here. The second element, the climate change, it was, I would like to say, at that time was Bordeaux the model that was influencing something. And at that time, the Bordeaux model started to lose a little bit of interest, and we started to talk about Burgundy. And exactly, if you see, there were two big appellations that drove us in this dimension. One was Barolo. I would like to say everything was born in Barolo. Everything was born in Piedmont. So Piedmont was the first region where this sense of inferiority went away. And we say, wait, with the Barolo boys, that was even before, but the real the real change is when Barolo became an example for other Italian that is different. I don't want to say when Barolo started to rise, that is much more before, it's 95, 97. But the 2010 were when Barolo became something to emulate in other regions, and that is where Brunello rise, and the Sangiovese is strongly connected, and that is where we started to really hear. I went to Etna the first time in 2008, 2009, just to have a look and say, okay. And when I tasted the wines, I say, wow, very similar than other things that you can find in Italy. I didn't say very similar than Shiraz or Cab. I say, wow, this is another Italian region with soul. And that is the reason, because also myself, I decided to move and change my job at that time. And I decided to move in a place where I couldn't express this identity in different places.
That's awesome. And Jessica, in your partnership with Andrea, how would you also have seen this change in talking to producers when this light bulb? Because you've been driving all around Italy. You guys have a lot of time in the car talking to each other, but then meeting producers, tasting wine. From your Texas American perspective, what are you hearing in the conversations with the producers about, this ability to have Italianality?
Well, it's an interesting question from a perspective of someone not from Italy, because I think in many ways it's the story of many new emerging regions, right? Because California did it, Texas has done it, and in many ways is still doing it. Oh, let's do exactly what France did. Everyone's got the French inferiority. But I think that, for someone who's been experiencing that in a different place, to see what's happening in Italy is fascinating, because as you mentioned, it is technically a young country in terms of its actual unification. But a word that Andrea keeps hovering and throwing out there in this conversation is the word soul. And that, I think, is what is now starting to shine through each of these regions we're talking about within Italy. Is maybe Italy unified in 1861. Maybe for many years they were emulating Bordeaux or other parts of France. But what is undeniable is that everyone in Italy, regardless of if you're in Sicily or Verona, you have an Italian soul that is the common thread. And so that is what I think is really starting to bubble to the top, is people I hate to say pride in like some nationalist term, but more like it's this strength of identity that they don't want to hide anymore. And they don't hide it when they're sitting around the table together, right? They don't hide it when they're enjoying life together. And so for many years, I think they thought they had to hide it in a way in their wines. And as Andrea is saying, Barolo kind of became that first region that's like, no more. We are the place to emulate. And we are going to start letting others within our own nationality or culture follow that story rather than the story of someone else who did it before us. That's something that I think is becoming very, very clear as you go up and down from north to south.
Well, I think, in the world of wine books that have been coming out, and I feel like in 2023, there are a few different Italian-centric wine books that have come out, but none have really, hit this identity. I like the idea that there's a philosophical identity and personality to a wine is near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited to see this book. I know there's a lot of work in front of both of y'all to put it together. When do you expect, or, speriamo, hopefully, when do you think we'll be able to see the book?
Yeah, so the goal right now is, and the publishing business is a whole other thing. We could do an entire podcast on that. But the goal is fall 2025. But as Andrea's mentioned, kind of embarking on this new journey as a strategic advisor for different family and established brands throughout the country, we are also launching the website andrealonardi.com, which will have a piece of Italianality on that. And so kind of people can start to look. It'll be little teasers of how we're going to be expressing that in the book. It's not going to be the book itself because that would make no sense. But the goal is to try to give people a taste of this and make that a place where people can kind of really see what's happening there.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough. I've taken up way too much of your time. Y'all, I greatly appreciate it. Jessica, it's a pleasure. I'm always excited to see a fellow Texas wine traveler, and see your name on this book is very, very exciting. And Andrea, always a pleasure and an honor. Every time I see and listen to you, my heart grows and my knowledge expands. So I can't thank you enough. And where can we find y'all online? We got the new website for Andrea coming, but do you have Instagram? Where can people follow your daily travels and exploits?
We're gonna work on Andrea becoming a social media influencer. You can find andrealonardi.com. You can find me at jessicadupuy.com. Andrea, you're Andrea Lonardi MW on Instagram. Myself, I'm Jessica N. Dupuy. N is in Nancy because someone else named Jessica Dupuy took the handle. So there you go, Jessica N. Dupuy. And we will be posting as much as we can to show people the process of this book.
Well, thank y'all very, very much. I can't wait to see Italianality out on the shelves of books and in my house because I think, again, this idea, this hypothesis, this philosophy, it's not even a hypothesis. This is beyond theory. I think this goes into scientific law. It's part of you're in the canon of Copernicus and, Newton guys. So in wine, but I like to be a little bit hyperbolic, but for me, it's an extremely important qualification of an idea because, like I said earlier, you guys are wrapping up what 25 years of selling Italian wine has meant to me. So I can't thank y'all enough. And I look forward to seeing you both in person this summer in Italy. And we'll follow y'all on social and look for the new website and the book in 2025. So thank you very, very much. And we'll see you soon. As I like to tell everybody, our new word, chowdy. So see y'all later.
Grazie mille.
After this conversation, I feel like I need to explore Italy even more. And I live here. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at podcast@wineenthusiast.com. And remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite shows. You can also visit the wineenthusiast.com website at wineenthusiast.com/podcast for more episodes and transcripts. I'm Jeff Porter. Thanks for listening.